Jai Sitaram. Ayodhya Kand, Chapter 20. In the previous section, we saw how Mother Kaushalya reacts to Lord Rama's news that he is supposed to go off to the forest for 14 years and Bharata is supposed to be crowned the king. We can see that there is a difference between how King Dasaratha reacts and how Mother Kaushalya reacts. And we will get into it in greater detail towards the end of this chapter. Verse 47. Apashyanti tava mukham paripurna shashi prabham kripana vartayishyami katham kripana jivikam. How can I, the pitiable one, spend this miserable life without seeing your face radiating like the full moon? Verse 48. Upavasaihi cha yogaihi cha bahubihi cha parishramaihi dukkam samvardhitah mogham tvam hi durgataya maya. Verily, this is a dark misery that the countless fasts, vows, observances, prayers, all directed to one end, your happiness and prosperity, have borne no fruit. Verse 49. Stiram tu hridayam manye mama idam yanna dhiryate pravrishi iva mahanadyaha sprishtam kulam nava ambasa. My sweet hopes have turned to dust and ashes in my mouth. The glorious future that dawned on my expectant sight has suddenly darkened into a gloom ominous and terrible. And even I must reap what I sowed. I made the bed and must perforce lie upon it. My heart breaks not under the stress and strain of this mighty calamity that comes upon me all on a sudden, even as a roaring flood that rushes down during the rains along the bed of some broad river, while the solid banks crumble to powder. Verse 50. Mama eva nunam maranam na vidyate, na cha avakasho asti yamakshaye mama, yad antako adya eva na mam jihirshati, prasahya simho rudatim mrigin iva. Is it imperishable? Is it the attenuated frame of mind really made of the heart of the adamant that it is grief-proof? It is then true that the death comes not upon a man a second sooner or later than its time. Or has death forgotten me? Or is the world of Yama full to overflowing that there is no room for me? Would that the dread Lord of Death bear me away hence this very moment, even as a king of the beasts carries away a weeping fawn or doe. Verse 51. Stiram hi nunam hridayam maya ayasam na bhidyate yad bhuvi na avadiryate anena dukkena cha deham arpitam dhruvam hi akale maranam na vidyate. The grief is inserted into my body, and even then my heart is stable and it has not broken into pieces and fallen on the floor. It is indeed made out of iron. There is no untimely death, this is for certain. Verse 52. Idam tu dukkham yad anarthakani me vratani danani cha samyamaha cha hi tapaha cha taptam yad apatya karanat sunishphalam bijam iva uptam ushare. Alas, a cry in the wilderness, a seed sown on rocks has been all my worship, meditation, charity, and penance to secure lasting happiness and power to my darling boy. This is the most unkindest cut of all. Verse 53. Yadi hi akale maranam svaya ichhaya labheta kaschit guru dukkha karshitaha gata aham adya eva pareta samsadam vina tvaya dhenur iva atmajena vai. If there is the least chance of my being blessed with death and oblivion before my time, I would go straight from here to the mansions of Yama, then live on miserably down here, even as a cow violently deprived from her one calf. Verse 54. Athapi kim jivita madhyame vrtha tvaya vina chandra nibhanana prabha अनुव्रजिष्यामि वनं त्वयैव गौः सुदुर्लभ वत्समी इवानुकाङ्क्षया. My place is not here when you are in the woods, and I will even follow you wherever you go. A weak and aged cow can never be parted from the side of her calf on which its hopes and joys rest. So, how can I live without seeing your bright face shining like the moon? Verse 55. Brisham asukam amarshita tada bahu vilalapa samikshya raghavam vyasanam upanishamya sa mahat sutam iva badham aveksha kinnari. Thus moaned and wailed Kaushalya in the utter agony of her grief. Then it came back to her that she might have to part from Rama at any time. Her rivals will wreak upon her the hoarded vengeance of the long past. And Rama was now bound by the bonds of truth and was absolutely powerless to stretch forth a helping hand. She raised her voice and wept aloud, even as a she Kinnari who sees a young one struggling in the toils of the fowler. This is the conclusion of the 20th chapter of Ayodhya Ch. Now let us go ahead and analyze Mother Kaushalya's statements in greater detail. The first thing that Mother Kaushalya says is that she wouldn't have felt this much grief had she been childless. And then she goes on to say that barren women, all they have to be sorrowful about is the fact that they don't have children. And right now, she has Rama, and yet she doesn't have him because now he has to go off to the forest. Mother Kaushalya then talks about the fact that she has never seen any happiness or prosperity, but she thought that maybe she would see them when her son comes to power. And she has had to listen to many disagreeable words from her co-wives. And even though they are all inferior to her, she still has to listen to all of them. And now, what is going to happen to her? Even when Rama was close to her, she has been rejected. Now, what is going to happen to her after he goes off on the exile? And she also says that her husband has treated her less than the servants of Mother Kaikeyi. And she has not had anything. And now, even if someone were to speak to her nicely, they would stop doing that out of fear for Bharata. And Kaikeyi is going to continue to speak to her very tauntingly. Then she talks about the fact that she has been waiting for 17 years since Rama's Upanayana ceremony to pray and hope that all her troubles will one day disappear. And she also says she cannot bear this unending sorrow for a very long time. And finally, after so many verses, she says, how can she live without seeing Rama's moon-like face? And then she says that all her prayers and fasts and observances and penances, they have all been quite futile because they did not give the achieved interest, and that is Rama's peace and prosperity. It did not happen. And then she talks about how Yama doesn't come when the living entity wants him to. And she also says that her heart is made out of iron. That's why it is not broken into pieces at this time. Every austerity she has performed has been quite futile because it has not worked. And then finally she says she will not be able to survive the separation from Lord Rama, just as how a cow cannot survive the separation from its calf. What will she do without seeing Rama's moon-like face? And there is no life for her without him. And then she laments and she is crying and sobbing and so on and so forth. So it takes her a long time to come to the point to say that, oh, how can I live without seeing your moon-like face? Then she goes about to say that she cannot live without him. She is just like a cow separated from the calf, and she's just going to follow him, and so on and so forth. But her first instinctual reaction is what is going to happen to her. She first says that she has faced a lot of miseries and she's going to continue to do so. Even while Rama was present, there was a lot of sorrow in her life, and now in Rama's absence, it's going to be exacerbated. So she's talking about herself at this point. Of course, Mother Kaushalya is a very highly elevated devotee. There's a reason why Lord Rama has appeared as her son. And we are going to see the actual maternal feeling rise up in a couple of chapters. It's not that she's going to be completely selfish, but we can see that her initial reaction, she thought about herself. And she also says that whatever fasting and everything she did was all futile. So that means that she had a motivation behind conducting all those penances and all that. So at one go, it might seem as if that was wrong, because she's praying to the Lord in return for something. So this is the proper definition of a Sakama Bhakta. That means it's almost like a barter system. I'm going to pray to you, you should give me something. But we should remember that she's praying for Lord Rama. She's praying for peace and prosperity for Lord Rama. She's making sure that Rama is always protected. And now she's feeling as if every single thing that she has done so far has been quite futile, because despite all of these prayers, Rama is going to go off to the forest. And that is not sitting very well with her. In direct contrast, the first thing that Dasaratha spoke about when he listened to the fact that Rama will have to go off to the forest was he talks about what mistake has Rama committed, or what mistake has Dasaratha committed, that they have to face such a terrible thing from Kaikeyi. And then he goes on to explain the great virtues of Lord Rama. He talks about his relationship with Lord Rama, that the world can exist without the sun, the crop can exist without water, but then life cannot exist in Dasaratha's body without Lord Rama. And he is willing to place his head at her feet. Please be gracious. This is not the proper time to ascertain whether he is being very friendly towards Bharata or not. Rama is the senior most, everything is wonderful, but has some evil propensity come onto Kaikeyi at the moment. It's so perverted. She has never done anything repugnant before, so why exactly is she doing it right now? Kaikeyi herself has extolled the values and virtues of Lord Rama. So now what is she going to gain by seeing Rama in the forest for 14 years? So it has always got something to do with Rama, extolling the virtues of Rama. Rama has served Kaikeyi so beautifully. Rama has done this. Rama has done that. There is nobody who can ever point a single finger at Rama When seeing Rama, Dasaratha is so happy. And now that particular Rama has to go off to the forest. Dasaratha cannot believe this. And therefore, even in Vatsalya Bhava, that means that a Jivatma will consider the Lord to be his or her son, his or her child, his or her disciple. Even in Vatsalya Bhava, there are different gradations. We can see that Dasharatha's is slightly different from that of Mother Kaushalya. Mother Kaushalya will continue on to talk about a lot of things, and we will see how much she loves the Lord, but then the initial reaction is very different. In the initial reaction, Kaushalya thought about how Rama's exile is going to affect her. And the initial reaction of Dasharatha was, what mistake did Rama do to merit this punishment? So there is a slight difference. And in the subsequent chapters, we are also going to listen to Rama convince both Kaushalya and Lakshmana that this is correct. He has to go to the forest. So Kaushalya does not agree very easily. She does take some time. And Lakshmana also needs a lot of convincing that Rama has to go off to the forest. And of course, he's always ready to do whatever his brother says. But it's very interesting to note that in Vatsalya Bhava, you have both Dasaratha and Kaushalya, and there is a slight difference in their reactions to listening to the fact that Rama has to go off on an exile for 14 years. In the next chapter, we shall continue with Mother Kaushalya asking Rama not to go. Jai Sitaram.